Men, hey, and welcome back to the shop. It's been at least a week since I worked on this thing, and just a couple FYIs. The tail ends of the mounting studs poke through the case. The mounting studs are secured with green Loctite retaining compound, and I know I say Loctite is evil and I rarely use it. This is an instance where you really want them never ever to come out. In addition to that, where the tail ends of the studs come through the case, I've sealed them up just to keep any oil from, seeping through the threads via capillary action, if that is even possible with the sleeve retainer in there. I seal it up with aircraft grade fuel tank sealant, and this stuff it's dries to a hard rubbery consistency. It stays flexible, and I like it to stay flexible. My experience with the JB Well kind of products is they're hard and they can crack. This stuff stays flexible; it won't crack. And this is just some little plastic cup, and any epoxy in this kind of plastic usually peels right off. This aircraft grade sealant is almost impossible to remove from anything. So I put a gob of that on the tails of the studs to keep any oil from oozing through. And like I said, it dries to this hard, flexible, rubbery kind of consistency. So that'll stay good for a long time. We're going to put this trans together, and just FYI, this trans, somebody in the past spent a lot of money on it. It has Andrews gears throughout. All of the gears are Andrews, and they're marked AP for Andrews products and a part number. And they're all in excellent, excellent condition. Putting it together is going to be pretty straightforward, I hope. And pisses me off. I had what I thought was a full gasket set. It turns out it isn't full, and it's missing some of the gaskets. So I won't be able to get it all the way together today. But we're going to start. So we're going to put the drive gear in and put the bearings in, and we'll take it from there. Okay, let's put these rollers in. There are 44 of them. The bearing race is new. It came in the case. And just in case, I've already done this once before, because you never know, there's a new race in there. It might not be honed out to the right size, lapped out to the right size. So I hate when you think you're doing final assembly, you get everything all greased up, and then you find out the rollers don't fit. So I do test fit any of this kind of stuff before I slobber it up with grease and get ready to call it a final assembly. Well, last one. Okay, they're all in there. Shaft turns freely and smoothly. This goes in next. There's a cork, seal, and the oil seal that go on next. I got the cork, I don't have the oil seal. So in order to keep this all from falling out, I'm just going to put the, well, what's supposed to go on next is the sprocket, which I don't want in my way. So I'm just going to, I got a piece of scrap out of my scrap pile, and I'm just using that to hold this all together. And it is left-hand thread. And when I test fit this, I snugged it all down to make sure that there was just a tiny little bit of end play in this setup. So this is good to go. Moving on. Alright, this is the main shaft, and Harley does a dirty thing with this. The main shaft pulls out the right side of the transmission, and indeed main shaft, low gear, and second gear do. Third gear, however, is too big to fit through the hole. So third gear has to be installed and removed while it is in the case. And sliding the gear on and off the shaft is not a big deal. What is a big deal is this frickin' snap ring. This thing is a giant pain in the balls to get off, and you've got to get it off, you know, manipulating down in here. So let's put this together, and I'll show you how I get it off. Well, I'm not going to show you all the way, because believe me, I'm not going to put it all the way on. But we'll stick the gear in the hole, and this is third gear. It goes in. The next thing that goes in is this thrust washer, then this snap ring, then the shifter dog, Alright, so we got the gear on. Let's get the thrust washer in. Okay, the thrust washer's going in. And what I use to get the gear, or excuse me, and what I use to get the snap ring on and off the shaft is this. This is a cheap Harbor Freight pick tool. The pointy end has gotten broken off, cut off, ground off, and I've ground just a little flat-sided edge on it over here, so it's kind of like a lever. And I could get that underneath the edge of the snap ring and use it to pry and lift and pull the snap ring back out of the way. Like I said, it is a giant pain in the balls. Now I got to get the snap ring up over the splines. And I'm going to use the tool to do it, hopefully. Okay, so I got it over the first couple of splines. I'm going to rotate the shaft. trying to hold it so it doesn't pop back over, and lift and pry some more. Getting it on is somewhat hard. Getting it off will test your manual dexterity. I think I got it. Oh, one more to go. One more spline to get it up and over. Okay, it's up and over. So now we could slide the shaft in, and as we're sliding the shaft in, we push the snap ring the rest of the way until it falls into its groove. About 3/8 of an inch to go. Okay, that's it, it's in all the way. All right, we're going to give the main shaft a little tap. It's in. Good deal. All right, we're going to put in the bearing retainer plate. This is not idiot proof. The 4 screw holes are equally spaced so it could go on in any one of 4 positions. Going by the picture in the book, and I should have marked this before I took it apart. I usually don't mark things, but I should have marked this thing just to make sure. But according to the picture in the book, it goes on in this orientation here, with the notch over here facing to the right. This thing uses 1/4-24 screws. A standard 1/4-inch screw is either a 1/4-20 or a 1/4-28. On these old bikes, Harley used 1/4-24 on a lot of stuff. So this is a 1/4-24. Don't try to jam a 1/4-20 or a 1/4-28 in there. It won't fit. And yes, Loctite is evil, but I am going to use a drop on these screws. These screws have no locking device, and they are inside something with moving parts. You really don't want it coming out. All right. use this happens to be a snap-on, and it's got a hex on it. It's good for getting a little extra leverage, and that takes care of that. And the next thing to tackle, in my estimation, the biggest pain in the ass, is the countershaft gear cluster. Harley, what were you thinking? Roller bearings, 22 on each end. You got to grease this up, put the thrust washer in, put the rollers in. There is an outer thrust washer, you got to put that in. Then you go around to the other side, you put the rollers in. Well, inner thrust washer, rollers, and then there's an outer thrust washer. Then you've got to drop this all into the case, and from this end over here, feed the counter shaft in without knocking any of the rollers loose, and get it all lined up through there. And of course, this thrust washer just wants to slide down and fall, and you know, it's a real giant pain in the balls. So let's do that. I think I'm going to spare you the 44 rollers, and I'll come back when I'm trying to shove it in the case. All right, all present and accounted for. Let's stuff the counter shaft into this tranny. Rollers are in on both sides. Gears are on, spacers in. There's a thrust washer in there. Let's see. This part of this operation is always a clusterfuck. I think, anyway. So far, so good. This is the tricky part. You got to slip this thrust washer in between here, and it don't like to go. Well, it's in there. Wow, that is the easiest one of those I've ever shoved in. Wow. Wow, boy, that's nice. Beautiful, looks good. Okay, the astute among you will have noticed possibly that I forgot a part. So let's put that in now. And these were screws I Loctited previously. It's firm coming out, but not impossible. So not too bad. The part I forgot is this guy, an oil deflector, goes up in here. So let's put another drop of Loctite on there and secure the oil deflector. Once again, Loctite evil, but occasionally necessary. Okay, that's good. Let's put in the I don't know. This is the anti-rotation plate for the counter shaft. Okay, lock washer. Little Guten tight. Let's call that good. Let's bend over a couple of tabs. All right, let's put in the steel stop for the kicker gear. Yes, I'm going to use EVA Loctite on these two screws too. You know, these screws get stretched every time you come down on the Kickstarter. And once again, there's no safety device on them in an area where if they fell off, they'd screw something up. Spring. Kicker gear. Let's see. Need another lock washer. Be back in a minute. Yeah, interesting. I got to cut one of these little tangs off. The kicker gear, only has one notch in it. All right, I ground one of the tangs off of the lock washer. You know, and a convenient way to lock up a transmission, you know, because I've got to tighten this nut and the shaft is going to want to turn, is if you allow it to go into 2 gears at once. Right now it's in 2 gears at once. It locks up. Now I suppose with a big enough bar and enough leverage, I could break this, but I'm not going to put an outrageous amount of torque on there. I mean, looking at the size of the nut, it's probably supposed to be 70, 80 foot-pounds, I guess, and I don't think I'm anywhere near that. Yeah, let's look in a book and see what the book says for torque value. You know, and this is why you gotta love old machinery. You know, new machinery, you know, it's pretty cut and dry. This says, the book says on this one here, on this nut, it says, be careful not to draw down the nut too tight. Don't go beyond the point where the top of the starter clutch is less than 5/8 of an inch above the edge of the gearbox. How's that for ambiguous, huh? And you know, the starter clutch right here is being secured to a tapered shaft. And I suppose if I got on this thing with a big enough bar, I could probably wrench it on there so tight that I'm going to strip the threads or possibly split the starter clutch in two as it wedges onto the taper. So I just measured it, and I'm just a scotch over 5/8 of an inch. I mean, I'm almost exactly 5/8. I could see the line there. So anyway, you know, that's kind of that black voodoo art of old machinery, you know. You know, and here's another one for you. I just looked up this nut on the end of the countershaft. The book says tighten the nut securely. I think it's secure. All right, I think I got everything stuffed in there that needs to be stuffed in there. I used my spray-on copper coat gasket on this one. And let's see if we get it in there without fucking anything up. Ooh, that could be a problem. I put a stud in here to hang on to the gasket, but it won't let me make the angle I gotta make to get the kicker gear behind the throwout bearing. There it goes. This is stainless steel hardware, so it always gets a gob of anti-seize on it. Anti-seize kind of being the opposite of Loctite. Okay, I got 3 screws in. Let's get it out of gear. Okay, it's in neutral. Let's make sure the kicker rotates. Ah, looks good to me. Let's put the rest of the screws in. And that takes care of that. Okay, shifter forks. When I set this trans up, I marked them left and right because they're shimmed. The forks are shimmed to get the right clearance between the gears. Unlike Sportster shifter forks, you just shim them left or right, whichever way they need to go. So that's an easier setup. One would hope, anyway. Okay, we need to check the alignment of the shifter forks with the drum and the ratchet top. Right now, sitting here, I have manually positioned the clutches by sliding them back and forth to be centered between the gears, here and here. The goal is for the rollers on the forks to fit into these slots without moving. We're going to drop this on as straight as possible. And it went on easy. It didn't have to wiggle and jiggle it. So that tells me they're probably lined up. But nonetheless, it might have shoved the fork one way or another a little bit, and the pins would have dropped up in the slots. So let's take it off as straight up as possible and see if the clutches are still centered between the gears. I made it move a little bit. You see, this one moved a little bit. Okay, let's take a look at how you would adjust the shifter fork positions using the Jim's alignment tool. It's got dowel pins on it. They go in the holes that correspond to where the dowel pins go on the transmission case. You use this alignment pin that comes with the tool, and you manipulate your ratchet top to get these long straight slots into a convenient location. You lay your alignment pin in there, you take your blue anodized sliding thing over here, and you lock it down. It sucks if they get loose. Give them a little snug so they don't come loose on you. And you go over to the other one, and same thing. You manipulate your ratchet top, and it'll shift. It's a little stiff doing it by hand. But anyway, manipulate your ratchet top, get your long slot in there, put your alignment pin in there to make sure everything is lined up. Tighten the set screw. Okay, this now represents neutral. These two blue anodized blocks are in the spot where neutral would be. Then you take your ratchet top and you manipulate it around again to get it into the actual neutral spot. And the actual neutral spot is when this notch right here is engaged with the plunger. So right now we're in first, and that's neutral. One of your slots is right here, but because this is between first and second neutral, the other neutral is right here. So when you go to adjust your gauge block, you use the long straight slot because it gives you more area to find neutral in. But anyway, get it back into real neutral, the half notch. Theoretically now, these slots, when your shifter forks are lined up in neutral on the trans, they should line up and hold the shifter fork centered between the gears. So let's take a look at that and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to position the shifter forks in neutral. So here's the 1, 2 neutral, and the 3, 4 neutral is between here, between these two gears. So you center your shifter forks up in there, and then you take your ratchet top to check everything, and you set it over here. And it should drop smoothly on if the top hats on the forks line up with the slots in the drum. I put a couple of long studs in here to help me raise and lower the ratchet top straight up and straight down so that I don't bump the shifter forks. So let's lift this up and see if they moved. Still centered exactly, and still centered exactly. So this is good to go. I did end up moving it, and honestly, I moved this one a little to the right. And when I was taking it apart, I dropped the shit, and the spacers went everywhere. So I had to pretty much, trial and error back together again. So I can't tell you how many I moved from one side to the other. But prior to adjusting it, this was kind of over here like that. And when I finally got done with it, it ended up being centered like we saw it. So anyway, this is good to go. And that's it for this right now. I don't have a ratchet top gasket for it, so I can't finish this up today. And I don't have a seal for the main shaft. So this is probably as far as I could get. I am just going to lay the ratchet top on there to keep crud out of it while I'm ordering some more parts. See you later. Man, it seems like this project has been taking forever. I've been into this, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And when I pulled this out, I was originally thinking I could just swap the guts over and shove it back in a day. That turned out not to happen. Mostly because I was missing a few odds and end parts here and there. Supply chain issues. Anyway, I think I've got everything I need to button this up. So let's see what happens here. I wanted a new cork. I didn't have one. I have one now. I wanted a new one of these. Well, the old one got destroyed taking it out. The book says to install it with the lip facing the trans case. So that's like this. So let's just see if I could tap it in. Much better. Alright, I'd say that's it. Okay, the next thing is the lock tab for this nut on this shifter fork. I had to adjust the shifter fork. I had it out, and I didn't have any more lock tabs. I have one now, though. Okay, the last time I took this nut off, I dropped all this crap, and basically I had to start over again with redoing the spacers. I did not drop them this time. Okay, there was a groove in this shaft that lines up with this hole, so this little locking screw could go in, and that's what keeps the shaft from sliding out. Once the screw is in, it's under the cover so it can't come out. Okay, very nice. The cover's in neutral. I didn't do anything to any of the parts in here, so this is ready to go just like it is. And that's pretty much it. Okay, the screws are stainless steel. So we're going to put just a little bit of anti-seize on every one of them. All right, we're going to call that good. All right, we're going to talk just a minute about drain plugs. This is the drain plug, of course, for this transmission. And it's a half inch by 13 threads per inch, the same as most all the iron head crankcase drain plugs are. And when the surface is pristine, this might seal up on you. Your sealing is done with this little brass washer, and it fits over the shoulder on this bolt, and as long as this surface is perfect, it'll probably seal up just fine. The trouble gets to be, of course, that the surface doesn't stay perfect for very long. As is very often the case, if the last thread gets broken out of there, this nice round hole isn't nice and round anymore. And, you know, this thing is so narrow, there's no area, there's no purchase for this to seat on the case to seal. So, this is what I do. This is a 1/2 inch copper sealing washer. So I use these instead. The trouble with these is that the area at the bottom of the threads is stepped down. So this floats all over the place. I'm going to take this out to the lathe and I'm going to put a shoulder on here so that this is always located in the center. So it will have a flat area against the head of the plug to seat against, and a shoulder to keep it centered, and you'll have all of this area. Well, not all this area, but a lot more area than this would give you. Okay, so here's the finished plug with the shoulder machined on it. The shoulder has to be shorter than the washer is tall so that the washer could crush against it. If you make the shoulder too tall, it won't be able to crush the washer. So I am going to put some Loctite 518 on there because I put Loctite 518 on all the plugs. And that's how we're going to seal this up. It'll be fine. Alright, I've made a real mess of that, but it'll work. Okay. This is going in the bike. And that's it for this video. I am out of here. Like, subscribe, join me on Patreon, buy a sticker, buy a coffee cup. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.